The following is a conversation with Mark Fusetti. Fusetti is a retired sergeant of the former Philadelphia Court Warrant Unit, and currently he operates in the private sector for organizations and influentials alike. Fusetti partners with a small contingent of people to provide visibility into the present horrors occurring on the streets of Philadelphia. He's also a Philadelphia for sports guy and loves coaching high school softball. If you enjoyed the conversation, take something away from it, I please ask you to rate, subscribe, and follow the page on Instagram at Overcoming the Divide. Thank you. Welcome to the show, Mark. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course. So I've been following you on Twitter through my Overcoming the Divide account for quite some time. I'm familiar with the content you post, the repost, and the visibility you try to bring to certain issues. But for my audience, could you inform me about what your kind of mission is, as well as your background, say some of your interest and where you're from as well?
Sure. So I live in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania here. I was a sergeant in the Philadelphia Warrant Unit. It was actually a court warrant unit. Some people get it mixed up with the police or the sheriff's department. We were actually our own agency. So for 10 years, I worked the streets of Philadelphia going after fugitives. I saw the worst part of the city. I saw some of the best parts of the city. And during that time, it gets to a point where a lot of people in law enforcement get this, what's the word I'm looking for? It gets a dark cloud comes over you where you want to kind of talk about your job. You want to talk about the things you're saying that are hurting you. But a lot of cops in law enforcement just don't do that. So in 2020, I started my own little podcast, kind of more of our own little therapy session. It's called Behind the Badge, where we give an inside look of what it's like to be a cop or any type of law enforcement in a major city like Philadelphia, not only on the street, but at home. And what that wound up spiraling into was people reaching out to me on Twitter with similar stories, wanting to talk about the stress of the job. However, they were really unable to talk to anybody for fear of getting removed from the street or being criticized for not being strong enough, whatever it may be. So what happened, people started sending me stories, but then they started sending me videos. And what turned into just a little podcast of me and a few people talking wound up in this past year, turning into people sending me videos of horrific crimes that are going on in Philly every single day and how it's affecting them, whether it's a cop, whether it's a citizen. And they're afraid to kind of talk and they're afraid to put it out there themselves. So me and a group of people decided together, well, we're going to put these out and we're going to show everybody how horrible this city has turned when it comes to crime. And we're doing it so when people finally, when they see it on the news, it's blurred out. So you don't get that quite the same effect as you would when you see it unedited, like when we put it out. So our goal is to really bring home how dangerous the city has become, how it doesn't have to be this way, because just 10 years ago when I was working, it wasn't this bad. And not much has really changed since then. I know a lot of people say different time, different era, but the reality of it, there was always heroin problems, there was always crime, there was always murder. It just wasn't as bad as it was today. And we put this out there so people know what's happening in every corner of Philadelphia. There's really no safe area anymore. So that way, when they go out and they decide to, before they decide to go move away, maybe if I make a change in the way I vote, it doesn't have to be Democrat or Republican. It's just somebody that's going to take the seriousness of these crimes and the safety of the people in the city. They're going to take that first. And that's why we put it out there. So everyone can have a front row seat to what's going on in our city And hopefully before everybody runs away, that can run away, everyone stops for 1 second and says, you know what? Maybe we as voters, we as the citizens, maybe we should step up and do something a little different than what we've been doing and see if there can be a positive change that way. And that's basically what it went to. It went from being a therapy session about my days on the street to this, cry for change in our city.
That's beautiful to hear, especially the origin of it, how providing kind of a space for people to talk about their personal experiences somewhere where I'm sure it wasn't like being under harsh criticism and rather just this cathartic effect from just being able to talk about your lived experience. So I appreciate you doing that, actually, number one.
Yeah,
But
my pleasure. And it helped too. It really does help. And I feel bad for a lot of officers and even some victims have reached out, of victims of crime, where they want to talk about it, but they're afraid to either get in trouble by their superiors, or the victims are afraid somebody else will come and retaliate. And it's sad. So I like to just listen. I tell anybody, if you want to talk, we'll figure out a way. And I'm here.
Interesting. I do want to touch on that recent increase in crime, though, as you point out, and how it wasn't this way 10 years ago. I mean, I lived in Philadelphia most of my life, all the way up to 18. Then I went off to college. And now I reside in the DC area. But yes, I don't remember this. And when I do say visit home, I am quite more aware of my surroundings as than ever before. And
What
I'm
area were you at?
Northeast Philadelphia.
Okay, that's where I'm at now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I do want to get your input and opinion as to why this increase occurred over the past couple of years. And it's not just, and I think it's good to clarify this too. It's not just an increase in the crime. I think it's fair to call out that it's a brazen, the acts themselves are brazen, broad daylight, and places that, random places that you should feel safe, like your own driveway, and just the type of weaponry that's being used as well. It's not just your 9mm pistol. It's, these illegal assault rifles, basically.
So a lot of people, yes, and you're right. Right now, it's so crazy because there's just no fear. There's no fear to commit the crime. A lot of it are juveniles out there basically living a video game. I have a detective who gave me some information. I'm going to be very vague about it. But there's a group of kids on certain social media platforms that are basically committing a lot of these crimes for a point system. And what they'll do is they'll commit a crime, they'll video it, as we've all seen plenty of videos of kids videotaping themselves committing crimes. You think it's like, what are you doing? How stupid can you be? Well, the reality of it is they're doing it for points in a game. So back in when I was on the street, that wasn't an issue. The juveniles were not as active as they are today. The guns have always been there, although people may think, wow, this is crazy. I've always seen them. I remember a job where we hit a bar one night. We went out with the local police in the 25th district. We went out with license and inspection to inspect the bar. We raided it. We got 27 guns out of that place. And there were some AK-47s, all the way to guns that look like Uzis, handguns, you name it. They're always out there. The difference between then and now is the consequences when you get caught. When you got arrested 10 years ago under DA Seth Williams, you were prosecuted for that and you were held accountable. It was rare to see somebody commit a gun or any crime with a gun or just get caught with a gun and not be punished in some way. Whereas today, that doesn't happen. The prosecution, just the cases they bring into court have dropped over 60%. The conviction rate's down into the low 20s. So it's part of people are just not afraid to get caught anymore. They know that police are understaffed. They believe they have a good chance when they go to court to either win or have the case thrown out. So if you live in that world where back in the day there was kind of a code on what you would do, who you would do it to, where today it's all gone. There's just no honor, there is no fear, and there's no accountability. And all that is just a recipe for the ultimate disaster.
Why do you think such a drastic policy or enforcement of consequences has been implemented,
Well, I
or lack
know,
of?
right. So the easy answer is going to be District Attorney Larry Krasner and
Mhm.
his vision when he came into office. Now, I'll be one of the first people to tell anybody the criminal justice system in Philly and in America is broken. It needs a nice overhaul. Anyone with any common sense or has lived in this system, I worked for the courts for over a decade. I know it. Everybody knows it. However, I believe his vision of revamping this system and fixing it was a little skewed because of his personal hatred for the Philadelphia Police Department. Like a lot of people don't know, Larry Krasner was a defense attorney that specialized in suing the police department before he became district attorney. So he already came in with an axe to grind. So when you do that and you talk about how we're going to revamp the system, we're going to make changes, but you stop prosecuting quality of life crimes or certain crimes of theft, and then you go after the police, twofold, people start to look at you like, what are you doing? I believe my last count, I think he had charged 57 police officers with crimes and only had 2 convictions. Because when he does that, he's going a little overboard. Some of the cops deserve it. I won't sit here and say all cops are great. That's not me. But there's some cops where it's like, really, you're charging this person again? Where if a civilian commits, just say, the same type of crime, an aggravated assault with a weapon or something, these cases are getting thrown out left and right, and victims, and some of the times they don't even give a reason. They just withdraw the case, and there's victims that are left out in the cold, like, what's happening to me? What's going on with my case? And a lot of times they're not even consulted. It's just done. So I know this won't be a popular answer with people that follow me. I believe Krasner came in with good intentions. But I think once he got in, he realized you can't play both sides of this. You got to pick a side. And unfortunately, his side is, I'll side with, some of the criminals first and the cops second. And we see what happens today because of it.
And it's worth knowing too that he was up for re-election about 2 years ago, maybe a little less, a little more now. And I spoke to his opponent, his main opponent, Carlos Vega, at the time when he was running, and it seemed like he had this grassroots support. But when it came to election day, it didn't, it didn't materialize in essence. And what I've heard is that, a lot of people who say might have been registered with the opposite party, say the Republican Party, were not willing to switch because they just weren't willing to. This is anecdotal evidence, nothing, quantitative about it. And that kind of brought me in, or made me think about what you mentioned earlier about the fact that before people leaving, maybe they should, or from not they should, but could consider voting differently. And as you point out, he's an elected official. You can have all your issues with Mayor Kenny that you have, could all be valid, say, but they're both elected officials. So it's not as he's appointed to this high ranking, powerful position and forcing these policies based off his experiences and his biases. He's being elected twice
Yeah,
now.
Philly is one of those cities, and I'm sure it happens. I don't follow across America, every city this way, but Philly will have under 20% turnout when it comes to any voting, any year voting, especially an off year that Krasner was, I believe he was an off year. So last year he was voted in. It's sad. There's also the problem with people will just vote for who they're told to vote for. Doesn't matter if they're a criminal. I mean, John Street was reelected when he was under federal investigation years ago. A lot of people will just blindly vote for whoever they're told. And when that happens, it's almost, there's just no chance for the citizens that really want change. I mean, even like Vega running, and it was a valiant effort, but he didn't have the money. He didn't have the real backing to finance. He didn't financially have the chance to beat Krasner. But it goes back to also the people in the city need to go out and vote. It's just that simple. Even Republicans are outnumbered 8-1 or 8-2 at this point. And there's this little unwritten rule here in Philly where you register Democrat, vote Republican. So the number is probably more 70-30 in that sense. But what you would need is all 30%, every single Republican to come out, and somebody needs to get in and take 20% of the Democrat. And that will cost a lot of money, a lot of time, and a lot of effort. And very few people, especially in the Republican Party, have that willpower to do that. So someone like Krasner, and you'll see next year when we have the mayor's race, or actually this year, rather, it's going to be who spends the most and who screams the loudest on TV. That's probably who's going to win. And that's sad. And that's another problem with Philadelphia right now. We have 7 former city council members that are going to run for mayor. And they're going to sit here and tell us about what they're going to do and what changes should be made. And all I could think about is, well, why didn't the 7 of you get together and do this while you were all in city council just last year? It's mind-blowing that they will all have a chance at the high seat in the city. It's crazy.
Do you see anyone running that you have hope in, potentially? Not just like you favor their views or believe they'd be good for the city, but actually have a possibility of them winning as well.
I believe so. Councilman David O, if he announces, I like his chances and I like his policies, and he's a guy, although he's a Republican, he's probably more down the middle than, he can relate to both Republican and Democrats and also independents. I think he would have the probably strongest chance of any person in the Republican field. For the Democrats, I'm still researching through people. I forget her name, Cheryl something. I just heard an interview with her. I apologize to her or people, but she was just on a radio program last week. I liked what she had to say. Jeff Brown, he seems to be an outsider. I always like an outsider. Anybody from the outside of the system coming in is always a favorite of mine. So they're the people, in my opinion, from what I've seen so far, I think can do something good. But again, it's the same thing. Once you get in, it's what do you do once you're in there? And that's the scary part, because anybody could say anything and you could fool a lot of us, but this city is on the verge of a collapse and we need some help and we need it fast. And hopefully one of these people can do it.
Speaking of the city council and different policies, the current president of the city council, Darrell Clark, I believe.
Darrell Clark. Yep.
Yeah, thank you. Darrell Clark has called for, I think re-implementation of the stop and frisk policy. What do you think about that? Do you think that would be a solution worth, bring back enforcing, or do you think that causes more problems and solutions?
Well, it all depends what so for a lot of people that hear that, a lot of people think what that means are cops just drive up the street, pick a person, jump out, grab that person, and pat them down. And that's just not how it works. It never did. A stop and frisk is a situation where, in your experience, you're in an area. You can, let's just say you're outside of 7-Eleven that's just been robbed 4 or 5 times in the last 6 months. In Philly, this happens. And you're on a stakeout and you see somebody walk past the door a couple times, but they don't go in. They keep looking in the window. You see this person fiddling around their waistband. These are, to a trained officer, this is a reasonable suspicion that this could be a potential robbery about to happen. So this is a person where cops would stop, hey, we're going to stop you. We're going to talk to you, do an investigation. And for our safety, we're just going to pat you down, make sure you don't have no weapons. And that's 9 out of 10 times. That's how it is for every case. Or somebody may see a fugitive. This is where our unit was very active. A lot of the people we would look for, the fugitives, were out on the street. They would give an address to say, hey, we were wanted and we lived at, 2020 Mockingbird Lane. But when we go there, they don't live there anymore. The chances are they're going to be in the area where they were arrested. So we'll go to that area and we'll spot Joe Smith walking up the street. We will get out. We will stop that person. We will conduct an investigation. Same thing. We stop them, frisk them just for our safety. We're not digging in their pockets. We're not throwing them in handcuffs or anything like that. They are always free to go until our investigation is complete, which usually resulted in arrest. And that's basically what the stop and frisk meant when it was implemented under Mayor Nutter. Were there cops out there who just stopped somebody for no reason? I'm sure there were. Was it as bad as the media would like you to think? Absolutely not. There was always a reason behind it. And I'm sure that would be reflected in any lawsuits that were ever filed, if any, against any officer for unlawful stop or search and seizure. It could be a great tool, but the problem with that right now, even if it is given the green light to go ahead, if your sergeant isn't on board, your lieutenant, your captain, your inspector, your chief inspector, deputy commissioner, commissioner, that's the ladder. If they're not all on board and somebody in that, ladder there doesn't like it, well, then now you're scrutinized on everything you do. And that is just another potential incident that can get you jammed up. Hence the reason why cops probably wouldn't do it right now, even if they were allowed to.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great segue into a question that a fan actually wanted me to ask, which was, how much or little do the statements and actions of the DA and mayor's office affect the PPD morale and their behavior?
Oh, it's astonishing. So right now, I communicate any given day between 5 to 10 different officers. Some I talk to constantly because they just need an outlet. And the general underlying theme from all of them, who are all separate from each other, is I will go out and do my job because I have to do it. If somebody's in danger, I'm going to go there. I'm going to try to save that person. That's why you'll hear a lot of you'll hear a news story where cops arrived and they scooped the person up and took them to the hospital. They don't care if that's a man, woman, black, white, gay, straight, transgender, doesn't matter. They will grab that person to save that person's life, and they will be off to the races. On the other side of that, if there is a fight amongst some kids, will the cops go there and try to break it up, shoo them off? Yes. Will they try to jump out, intervene, detain somebody? Probably not. They're not going to be that aggressive as they were 10 years ago, because they know for any arrest that they make, the district attorney is going to scrutinize their arrest more than the criminal and the crime being committed. And because of that, the cops come in to the districts, to their units, to their areas with the mindset of, why am I going to risk my life, my freedom, my pension for a job where if it goes sideways and I do make an error, I'm just trying to do my job, but something bad happened, mistakes happen. Now I can go to prison or I can lose everything because of that. Instead, I'm going to just do what I have to do, which are certain calls that you just can't hide from. And, the other part is you got cops who would get hurt, fall down a flight of steps, or get in a fight, bust their ankle, bust their knee, bust their arm. and they would fight themselves to get back. I want to get back on the street. I want to get back on the street, even though their injuries may not be fully healed. To where now, and I don't blame any cop that does this, I'm going to wait till my injury is 100% healed before I come back and risk injury again for a department that really won't have my back unless, unless Krasner basically says, okay, this is an okay job. We're not going to pursue anything. So to answer the question, the morale has been decimated because of the lack of leadership from the mayor, the police commissioner, and knowing that you have a district attorney that's willing to sacrifice you as an officer just so he can prove to his voting base that he's going to go after cops. It's sad.
And going off that, how do you have insight into how the different offices view each other, how the city council sees the DA's office, how the mayor sees the DA, how the DA looks at the commissioner, Outlaw, I believe. So how I'm curious as to how those offices contend with one another.
So when I worked in the courts, I know Mayor Nutter, Seth Williams, DA Seth Williams, City Council at the time, they all worked really well together. The police commissioner was it was a good team. All four of them, all four offices combined worked well. So they didn't always get along, but they were professional about it. I know that the district attorney and mayor don't get along. Now, I know somebody in the mayor's circle, they don't get along. The mayor, some city council members do. Some of them don't like him. Some of the city council members love Krasner. Some don't. The police commissioners is not well liked by everybody. And I would imagine it goes the same way from her back to the mayor and back to the district attorney. They do refrain from trying to put blame on each other, but it's no secret that if you put all of them together in a room, they're not going to come out singing Kumbaya together. Sadly, it's a dysfunctional four-headed monster, and the city suffers for it.
And these, say, poor relationships obviously have an effect on how, say, policies are enforced and how offices, conduct themselves, and say like Krasner with the PVD. But how does it get so poor so fast? I guess is my question, because we're not looking back that long ago, like 10 years we're saying. How does Krasner come here and then implement some policy changes and enforcement based on, say, his beliefs and experiences, then maybe a year or two later Outlaw comes in, and so how does it just go, I guess, downhill? If you have any insight into that.
I know exactly what you're asking here. And Krasner came in with a campaign before he was ever elected that I'm going to go after the cops. And Philly has a high crime city, always has been. So that resonated with a lot of people in the lower income neighborhoods where police brutality, is something that's believed that happens on every corner, every day to every member of their community. So Krasner knew what to tap into. Like, I'm going to come after the police. I'm going to hold them accountable. Once he got elected, there's a famous clip. You can probably find it anywhere. The night of his victory, people are chanting "F the police," and they're all, even he's sitting there with his hands up until finally someone's like, no, you can't be a part of that. And then it calms down. But from day one, he came in like, I'm going to go after cops. And he did. He went after a lot of cops fast. He went after, I'm missing jobs right off the top because there's been so many. But all of a sudden, the police department see him right away, like, this guy's coming after everybody. There was an incident, I don't know if you remember this, a few years back. 6 police officers were shot on the strike force unit. They went to a house in North Philly, 16th Street, I believe.
Yes.
2 officers were stuck inside. They weren't being held hostage, but they were trapped on the second floor. Well, one of those officers is a friend of mine. And he had told the story to me before that Krasner came to the scene with, I believe, defense attorney Shaka Johnson, and they negotiated to get the defendant out of the house so the police wouldn't go in to save their officers. I mean, the cops were ready to go in to exchange, because this guy was popping off shots while everybody was outside still after he struck all the officers. And that was the day where I know, I can't speak for my friend, but I know from what he has told me that him and virtually everybody that was on that scene realized this guy does not care about police. He was more worried about getting the armed subject out safely rather than the cops go in, which probably would have led to him being eliminated, to save 2 officers. And, you know, his story of what he had to sit through for 5+ hours, he told me him and his partner had to turn their phones off because people were calling them.
Mm-hmm.
Their team weren't allowed, a commander would not allow the teams to go in to get them. Because anyone that can't imagine what it's like being a cop, I could tell you every single cop outside was willing to put their life on the line to run in and save those 2 guys. And he told me how they had to take turns. They were just laying at a certain spot in the house, 2nd floor. And if the guy came upstairs, they knew we're going to have to shoot. We're going to have a gunfight right here with nowhere to go. It's going to be us or him. And that stress for 5 hours while the district attorney's outside with a defense attorney, because, and here's what really drove him nuts. And this is a black man, by the way, that they said the optics were more important to the commanders outside. They did not want the police killing a black man on camera. And that's why there was so much negotiation between the district attorney and
Mm-hmm.
the defendant. So that day was the day where I think the entire police department said, we can't trust this guy. And real quickly, the issue with Outlaw, when she came in, the George Floyd riots happened shortly after. And what killed her chance with her officers was the day where we've probably all seen the incident where the SWAT officer sprays the people on the highway
Mm-hmm.
with OC spray. Well, she gave that order to do so. There's audio and there's paper trails of it, but she denies it. She made a deputy commissioner take the fall for it.
Mm-hmm. Familiar. With
also Krasner coming in saying, if you don't take the fall, I'm going to lock you up. So now this deputy commissioner had to, fall on the sword so he doesn't lose his freedom, his pension, thousands of dollars to fight in a legal battle. And from what I'm told, I can't confirm it, but somebody within the mayor's circle told me that Kenny did go to Outlaw after that and asked her to resign. And she refused and countered with him, no, you're going to have to fire your first black female commissioner and explain why. And he didn't. And that basically cut his knees out. And this is why, one of the reasons there's a friction between the mayor, the DA, the commissioner, and city council. They just, it's unbelievable and sad. And the city, as we see today, the city are the ones falling victim to this.
And while we discuss, say, the higher increase in crime and the turbulent, rather, say, poor relationship between all the different offices, I also do want to take a look at the increase in, say, drug overdoses, as well as just having, certain neighborhoods absolutely decimated by drug use and by, say, the lack of tackling the issue. And I want to hear your thoughts on it, specifically in Kensington, and your experience with it as well.
Yeah, so everybody's now probably seeing some type of video from Kensington Ave where it literally looks like it's a scene from the Walking Dead movies. It is horrible. I posted some myself. Heroin has always been a problem in Kensington. It's a little strange. So Kensington is associated with heroin, whereas parts of West Philly, North Philly are associated with crack. You don't see those videos much from somebody out on 52nd Woodland area. Kensington is probably the #1 hotbed for all drug activity, I would argue, in America right now. What has happened is the city has basically allowed these individuals to stay there, to do drugs, sell drugs, and just linger in this area. It's probably a square mile. People that I'm just going to name off straight, you probably have no idea, but this is going to be like, imagine a box. It would be Erie and Tarsdale to Frankfurt Avenue, down to Frankfurt Avenue up to Lehigh up to 5th Street. Just picture it's like a big box. In there, Kensington, part of North Philly, where the city's basically pushed these people to stay. It's almost like anyone watched the movie The Wire, or the show The Wire on HBO, where they called it Amsterdam, where they just had all the drug activity in this one little area, and they kind of just monitored it. This is what Kensington has been for about 20 some years now. Let's leave it here so it doesn't spread to all the neighborhoods, and hopefully we can just contain it here. But the difference between 10 years ago and today was 10 years ago, there was proactive policing. We would go out and lock people up under warrants. Police would lock people up using drugs out in the middle of the street. Or if there was somebody selling drugs, they would arrest these people and at least get them off the street, get them into the system where there is a chance the person, he or she, can get a new chance at life. Sometimes it takes 10, 15 times to lock somebody up before they realize, I don't want to do this anymore. But right now, none of that's happening. All these people are they are literally allowed to just roam the streets day in and day out, cause any kind of ruckus they want. While people don't realize, when you see these videos, people live in these houses. People that don't have the means to move, or they have to get up and go to work. They have to walk through the ocean of people and trash that you see in all these videos just so they can get their kid to school, because they have nowhere else to go. When we watch, a lot of people watch from their comfort of their home and the safety of their nice neighborhood, a lot of people forget that there are everyday citizens that cannot move out of these locations, that are basically being held hostage. And when we were our unit was out on the streets, we made sure we went to these areas, and we made sure we talked to the neighbors and told them, I can't tell you how many business cards I gave out to people that lived on D Street or Bodnot Street or Somerset, and said, hey, if anybody comes in this abandoned house, you call me, I'll come, I'll get them out. I'll lock up anybody I possibly can. I'll make sure they don't burn that house down, which they'll later on burn your house down. We were so proactive in cleaning these streets that I actually have video that I'm going to post eventually, of the same areas you see today with hundreds of people and pounds of trash, completely empty on a midnight, like on a Friday. So some proactive work could go a long way here. Unfortunately, the city and the police department are told, now the officers want to do it, but they're told no. Krasner, the district attorney, will not prosecute anybody for any minor drug offenses or paraphernalia offenses. And the commissioners told them, don't even waste your time locking these people up. And that is why you get to see these horrific videos day in and day out.
And these people, are they local? Are they native to Philadelphia, or now they they hear about this area and they coming in from surrounding areas, surrounding states and cities?
It's a great question. They come from everywhere, every background. I locked up a doctor before, a teacher, former cop, a detective, a person from New Orleans, a guy from North Carolina, California, you name it. I've seen the people from every corner of this country. There was some people from somewhere in Europe, I forget. There was a couple that came over. They said they came over for like a holiday to party, and they just never left. Philadelphia was always known to have the purest heroin in the country. People would drive hours to come to Kensington, risk their safety, risk their money, their cars, just to get a little bit of the Philadelphia heroin. And they would, a lot of times would go home. Some would stay. And sometimes when you stay, they never get out.
And actually, another fan question relating to this is, in say without these barriers that the police are facing to say being proactive in tackling this issue, how long would it take to actually clean up this area or restore it to like a former state?
That's a great question. It all depends on the resources that are going to be provided. So, realistically, the police, along with the sheriff's department, because they're the ones in charge of the fugitive unit now, the police and the sheriffs could go down there in a day or two and basically interview every single person to see who is a fugitive. Every person you see down there, I would say 70 to 80%, and that's probably lowballing it, are wanted on some type of bench warrant or probation warrant. So they could go there, lock up, let's just say 70% of the people. Well, what happens when you do that, and this was one of our tricks, when we would go to an area like that and lock up 6 or 7 people, everybody else in that area thinks, I got to get out of here. And a lot of times that would send people home. It would send people to a friend's house, but it would get them off the street for that night. And it's that night where they're not out getting high, getting raped, getting robbed, getting beat, where they say, you know what, this isn't the life I want anymore. It may only be one person a day, but at least we were given the chance, given at least these people a chance to survive. I had one of my greatest friends, best friends growing up, turned into a heroin addict. We talked about it. He's recovered now, but I saw him 3 times in Kensington. Each time I arrested him. And I told him, I know at least tonight you're not going to die. You can be mad at me for sending you to jail, because Philadelphia jails are no picnic. They are not, they're horrible. However, at least you're eating, you're getting medical treatment, and you're safe. So I would do it to my own children. And that's why I feel they have to kind of arrest their way out of it, just to kind of give some people the kick in the rear end to try to get, on the track of getting recovered. Right now, there are, non-NGOs down there trying to get people in, trying to get them some help. But, it's very few go. I firmly believe a 48-hour sweep of the entire area could clean it, but then you would have to be proactive afterwards. Once somebody comes back and a group starts forming, we got to clear them out. Let them know Kensington is no longer a safe haven for this activity. And eventually people are going to try to find other places, or they're going to figure out, I got to get better. And that's why I firmly believe, to start, you have to arrest your way out of it. Once that part's over, I believe there could be other avenues to making sure these people get the help they need.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't a safe injection site has opened up in South Philadelphia, was it, or is planning to open?
I believe it's planning to open.
Open, yeah. And in your experience, in your just personal opinion, what is your view on that? Or do you think that'll alleviate the problem? Do you think that's just gonna make things worse? I mean, just thinking of it personally, I know I can't imagine anyone ever advocating for that in their own neighborhood. So that's why I think it's pretty tough for the advocates of it, because, in principle you could be for it, but putting it in your own neighborhood's a whole nother, thing. So I'm curious to think or hear your opinion on it.
So my opinion was always to the politicians that wanted this. Why don't you open the first one up next to your house and see how bad you would want it then? Do I think it'll work? No. A lot of people don't realize there was a group that it was a needle exchange program in the city back when I was on the street. So that people could go there, get clean needles from these people. They could do their heroin there and no one would bother them. And we never knew where this group was. They were kind of, it was like a secret group, I guess. Everyone knew of them, but we never knew where they were stationed. And we wouldn't have gone there to arrest people anyway. It's just, it's a little unethical in my opinion. But when we would ask people, do you like it? They don't. A lot of these people are doing this because they don't want anybody telling them what to do, where to do anything, or how to do it. It's the life. It's just like a lot of homeless people. If you ask them, why don't you go to the shelter? Too many rules. I don't want to go there. You'll see people out on the street freezing, like, go. There's plenty of shelters in Philly to go to. And they'll say, no, too many rules, don't want them. Same with people that have a serious drug problem. Why don't you go to this place or that place? And it's because of the rules. I would imagine the same thing's going to happen with any safe injection site. You might get a couple people that'll go there, but an addict doesn't want to hear a lecture on why you shouldn't do this and why you should get help. They just want to inject, get the dope in, and be left alone. So, my opinion, I don't think they'll work. And they should be opening near the mayor's house, near Darrell Clark's house, and instead of just putting it in an area where people don't want it. But, that's from my experience. I don't think, talking to drug addicts my whole career, listening to every single story they had to tell, I don't see them all of a sudden now getting on a train to go all the way South Philly or wherever the next one will be to get high. They're going to get their stuff in Kensington. They're going to stay in Kensington.
And, I do want to just kind of get your advice, or like to the audience or just to people in general, whoever's listening to this, is when you look at this issue, it's quite complex. I appreciate what you said earlier about, say, Krasner, not that, say, I'm in fan of his policies or just him as a person, but, it's more than just the evil man. He, that came in with these evil intentions per se. You acknowledge he may have good intentions, but there's mainly came down to biases and these personal experiences that, leaned them in one way, and therefore he just acted in that way. And with that, obviously some of those experiences could be valid. He could have some, pretty poor experiences with the police, as say other people have in the past. How would you recommend approaching this issue of understanding the almost dissonance between, the police, the mayor, the DA's office, and just, life in Philadelphia? How would you recommend kind of like just being open to the issue, that it's not just pro this or pro that or anti this and anti that? It's just a very complex, breathing issue.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's pretty tough to probably wrap that all up. So I would suggest first, people got to realize that there are bad people in every profession. There are bad doctors, there are bad teachers, bad trashmen, bad firefighters, bad cops. That is and always has been, a small minority number of any department. Philly used to have 6,000 some officers. I don't know. I think they're down in the 4,000 range. I can tell people from personal experience, witnessing it myself, good cops hate a bad cop. They hate the cop that we call super troopers, that just wants to scream and yell and threaten everybody. They hate a cop that'll get rough with a person in handcuffs. They hate a cop that would do anything to jeopardize their safety and their freedom. I feel if Krasner actually understood that when he came into office, realizing there are 99% of the cops are good people, and the few that he had interactions with when he was suing the city is not realistic to the overall story that he ultimately tried to tell in his campaign. I feel if Krasner were to sit down, not with the FOP, with officers from all districts, hear them out, hear their concerns, with the mayor and even the police commissioner, with those officers being protected, understanding their frustration, and then maybe having citizens hearing their frustration and being an arbiter between the two instead of Krasner trying to be, I'm for this person, which seems to be like the criminals today, and I'm against the cops. I don't think he'll do it. I don't think that's his intentions. I don't know Krasner personally. I knew of him when I worked for a private company. The boss was friends with him. I've heard stories about the guy personally. I just don't think he would have any desire. So unfortunately, I think what we're going to have to do is wait for the next mayor, the next police commissioner, hopefully the next district attorney, and obviously there's going to be a whole new slew of city council members. I think once they all get together, I think what needs to almost a giant town hall meeting of citizens, cops, elected officials, all together for a couple hours. Let it all air out. Let it all go. That's how we would. When I was a sergeant, and I had team members that were disagreeing or didn't get along, we would shut the roll call doors. Everything's on the table. Just got to keep it professional and don't get personal. Have at it. Let's iron it out. And I think if somebody, the next mayor came in and suggested, let's all get together, find out what's the problems. Why do the people in this area not trust the police? Why do the police not trust Krasner? Why does Krasner not like these cops or these people? The new mayor, what are you as the boss of everybody? What is your suggestion to make sure everybody can just come together and just be a normal, happy city that, instead of this place where you literally have to look over your shoulder everywhere you go. And I don't think that's too much to ask for. And I don't think it's impossible.
That's good to hear. And before wrapping up, I also want to highlight your Twitter because you do, as I said, provide visibility to all the different horrors that are occurring daily. So that is your Twitter.
It's at my name, Mark Fusetti, MarkFusetti. It's my real name, so that way people can really know who I am. I don't hide behind anything. I want everyone to know that I mean it when I am putting all this stuff out there. Everything I say or anybody I back politically, like my buddy Sam Arpisa, who's running for city council, I do this because I truly mean it. This is who I am. If somebody doesn't like it, has a problem, I encourage everybody to send me a message, DM me. I will go back and forth with anybody. I don't expect you to agree with me. The only thing is once you start going nasty or personal, cursing out, I just stop. But that's my Twitter. Anyone can follow it. I have a lot of content that I put out. A lot of it I can't. Some of it's even too graphic for Twitter. But I'm also here for people if they need an outlet where they had a bad encounter with an officer. I'm helping a kid right now. I recommended a friend of mine who's a lawyer who had a bad encounter with police officers. The cops were wrong. I told him they were wrong. He was a little wrong in his side too, but they should have known better. Told him this is what you do. This is who you talk to. And I'm not blind to all cops are great. I'll never be that way. And I'm not blind to all criminals are bad. I know there's good and bad in both sides. It's just a matter of trying to make sure we all maintain this level of sanity before this ship really sinks, because it's going fast.
Well, I appreciate the work you do. I'll definitely personally make sure to keep up with it. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I also want to highlight your podcast, Behind the Badge, as well. The reason you started that I thought was extremely inspirational, and the work and what it just turned into, I think, is amazing. So if anyone's interested in checking that out, it's Behind the Badge.
And appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. And thank you for being here today, Mark. And
thanks, Daniel. I really appreciate having me on. Thanks a lot.
All right. See you.
Talk to you soon. Thanks.